Hey beautiful people, it's Steph here if you don't already know, and on this channel I just do all things careers and all things lifestyle. And in today's video I'm doing something a little bit different. I asked you on my Instagram what you wanted me to debunk in terms of myths of being a trainee, so just life as a trainee generally. I did also ask for those of you who follow my Instagram before you come and comment and be like, oh, but you also said you're gonna talk about US law firms. Yes, I did, and I'm gonna do that in a different video. But for today, I'm just going to debunk the myths of being a trainee. And I'm also actually going to be doing my makeup in the background. Please don't take this as gospel. I'm not an MUA. I'm not a makeup artist. Those of you, again, who follow me on Instagram will know that I've got some goals that I've been trying to achieve throughout the year. And one of those goals is actually learning how to do makeup. So because this is a safe space and this is a safe community, right? Nobody's gonna laugh at me, nobody's gonna judge me. So I'm gonna try to do my makeup whilst going through some of the questions that you guys sent in over on my Instagram. But please do make sure that you like, comment, subscribe, give me a follow on my Instagram as well, and let's get straight into the video. Okay, first things first, I don't know if it's just me, but like so obviously when I was like 16 and I heard about this whole makeup thing on YouTube, I think I learned this one routine. So like you do your eyebrows, you do your concealer under your eyebrows, then foundation, then concealer, then all the other stuff, and also eyeshadow goes in there somewhere. So I'm gonna follow that routine today, but we'll see how it goes. But anyway, let's see what the first question is. So the first myth to debunk is no work-life balance. Of course, that's the first one. Anyway, work-life balance. I have here and there spoken a little bit about work-life balance, I'll be honest. I think there's a couple of things. I think over my time, so I'm now obviously in my third seat, right? So I've been there about 15 months now. And over time, my work-life balance has actually gotten a lot better. I would say in the beginning, and I think this was probably compounded by COVID, if I'm going to be fair. So I don't actually think this was necessarily a trainee problem everywhere or whatever. But like, yeah, in the beginning, my work-life balance wasn't necessarily that great. But there were also like certain things that I wasn't doing that I think kind of made it not be that great. Do you know what I mean? So to give you an example, now if I want to go somewhere on like a Wednesday evening or like a Tuesday evening or something after work, I tell people what I'm doing. So I'll be like, yeah, I'm going to the theatre today, like I'm out with my friends or whatever, because I find that when people know what it is that you're up to, like most people are actually quite nice, and unless you are the only person for some strange reason who can do this particular thing, they will actually just try and find someone else to cover for you and someone else to do it for you. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I have a mirror in front of me, that's why I'm looking here, but actually this camera is actually kind of looking nice, so let me try to figure out the eyebrows there. So yeah, that's just to say that I don't think work-life balance is that bad for me. Now, the way that I would caveat that as well is I have definitely heard of people, like different trainees, doing some horrific hours. And when I say horrific, I'm not talking about your odd late night. Like, for example, when it's exam season, you might study a little more than you would normally when it's outside of exam season, right? There are definitely times where you're gonna have to be working late. So when a deal's closing or this or whatever, like you're working late. But I've definitely heard of some people who just, even outside of those times, they're still just working late. But that hasn't been my experience. Do you get what I'm saying? So that's why for me, whenever people ask me about work-life balance, I'm always just like, well, it's kind of all right for me. Do you know what I mean? But I'm not turning a blind eye to the fact that, generally speaking, this isn't an industry that is known for the best work-life balance, let's say. Second question. So we've got cutthroat culture, not collegiate / every man for himself. Do you know what? I think this is firm specific. Like, I don't even think different types of firms have it. Like, I don't think like all Magic Circle firms, for example, have a cutthroat culture, or all US firms or whatever. I think this is very much like different firms have different ways of doing things. And culture, for me, from my experience, is also a top-down thing. So it tends to be, depending on how partners set up the culture, it kind of trickles down a little bit. So in my experience, I have not experienced a cutthroat culture. I think there are a couple of things that probably help out. A lot of the teams that I've been in are kind of, they're not new practices, but in terms of like what they're trying to do with clients, they're emerging things, quote unquote. So that means everyone kind of has to work as a team because we're trying to like pitch to new clients and do this, that, whatever. So there's less of a cutthroat culture there. I think the other thing that makes it a bit less of a cutthroat culture, again, for the specific teams that I've been in, so I've been in debt finance, capital markets, and I'm now in private equity. I think with the exception of private equity, the first two teams I were in were actually, at the time, I thought they were massive, but they're actually small. Like, in comparison to corporate, they were not as big at all. And I think because the teams were a bit smaller, there was just no room for that cutthroat culture, because you kind of just all had to work together as a team anyway. Third question even, we've got super long hours. So I suppose I did speak about work-life balance, but I didn't go into the hours specifically. So honestly, and this is coming from someone who has not done a contentious seat, one thing that I would say is that in the 3 transactional seats that I have done and I am currently doing, hours are unpredictable. That's what I would say. So I wouldn't say there are super long hours. I would say there are super unpredictable hours, because you can have a day where you think like, not even where you think, you might actually just not get any emails in the morning. It's a calm day. Like, yeah, you've probably got a document here or there that you're drafting, but really and truly, you could actually have finished work by like 2 p.m. that day. And then something comes in for you at 5. And then that particular thing that came in for you at 5 is what's going to keep you there till like, I don't know, 8 or 9 or whatever. So I think the hours are unpredictable. I wouldn't necessarily say that they are long. I think the further you get into your TC, the more you are able to predict a little bit. So for example, like sometimes when I get put on certain deals, because I now know certain questions to ask, like I'll be like, oh, what's the client's kind of timeline for this? Like, what's this, that, whatever. And I feel like that then allows me to kind of figure out whether I'm going to have one of those days that it's going to be a really long day kind of thing. And also, I find that when I was in my first seat, like I would obviously be copied on all of the emails from clients and stuff, but I didn't actually understand what a lot of those emails said, which meant that there were probably times where I could have predicted that maybe a client would need something, which, you know, I would need to draft or the associate would need to draft or whatever. And I probably should have flagged it, but, you know, I didn't, because I didn't know what it was saying. And then at like 5 p.m, when like someone else has seen it, they're like, oh, actually, we need to do this. So then now we have to start. Do you get what I mean? So I think as time has gone on, I've become a bit more attuned to like what certain things mean and what we need to do on the back end as lawyers and all that kind of stuff. So it's been a bit easier. But yeah, I don't know if that's an actual answer to the question. I guess what might be helpful is like an example of a particularly late night. The latest night I've done in this seat so far, should I say, is I think I finished at like 10 p.m. That was the latest I've done. I leave it to you to decide whether that is particularly late or not, but that is the latest I've done, and I've only done that once in 3 months. So next one, lack of support as a trainee. I think it's 2 things. So first of all, it depends on who you get as like a supervisor or who you work with, because I think different people have different teaching styles. So there are some people who maybe, I guess it also depends on how you define support, to be fair. Like if you're the type of person who, for you, support is someone walking you through every single process, or someone like literally printing a document for you and like taking you through each page or whatever, then there are definitely certain people who will do that, and then there are certain people who won't, right? But if for you, support is like someone who is just available to answer questions, again, there's people who will do that. So for me, one thing that I have started doing, I started doing it in my second seat, and I found it really helpful, is that whenever I started working with someone who I had not worked with before, in the beginning, I would always ask them, what's your preferred teaching style? And what it usually led to was them asking me, what's my preferred learning style? And I found that that little dialogue really, really helped, because it meant that we kind of understood each other when it came to the kind of support that I would need. Me personally, I'm the type of person that I like to kind of get on with things by myself, and then if I need you, I'll ask you for help. That's what I like, and that's what I would consider a support. So having that kind of conversation at the beginning was really, really helpful, because like, let's say for example, I'm working with someone who maybe they like to, I don't even necessarily want to say micromanage, because that sounds quite negative, but like maybe they like to go through or walk you through every single step. If I tell you at the beginning that actually I don't really learn effectively like that, and it's probably a bit better if, you know, maybe I could check in with you a little bit more often because you prefer that, but it's probably just better if you let me get on with it and then I'll ask you questions. That to me is a really good sign of support, because like you're catering to what it is that I actually need. I don't know if that makes sense. And it's important as a trainee to try and figure out what does good support look like to you, so that you can then communicate that with the associates that you're working with. Next question is unapproachable seniors / supervisors. I find questions like this quite interesting, because I don't know, maybe it's just me, because I did start working very young. Like I've been in the working world since I was 14, so maybe because I'm just used to this working life, it never really occurred to me to particularly worry about unapproachable people at work, because there will always be unapproachable people at work wherever you work. I'm sure even the nicest place on earth has one unapproachable somebody in there, and that's just how it's the nature of the way things are. Do you know what I mean? But the answer that I tend to think of whenever people ask me this is that when you were in school, there was probably somebody that you didn't like, right? And how did you manage that? That's how I kind of manage unapproachable supervisors or partners or whatever. In my personal experience, I've not actually had that many, I'll be honest. But I would definitely say there's likely going to be one in every team, because that is just the nature of the world. Like, that is just how things work. So you are likely going to come across one. I guess a couple of tools that you might find helpful, and it depends. Like, if it's a thing of you need to ask them a particular question and you're not sure how to approach them, chances are you're not just going to be staffed on a deal with just you and a very senior associate, or just you and a partner, right? Chances are there's going to be some other person there. So if that other person, like maybe a mid-level associate or something like that, is a bit more approachable, I'd say maybe go to them, and either ask them what it is you wanted to ask the partner, or if they just won't know the answer, maybe you can actually ask them, how do I approach this person? Because, you know, they've probably been there longer. They might know a couple of tips. They'll know what it is that you should say so that the person doesn't, like, be mean to you or whatever. Do you know what I mean? So I would say that's probably the easiest way to get around it. If you don't feel like you can do that, PAs are the biggest geniuses in any law firm. I tell you that for free, especially the PAs that have been there for years, because they know everyone inside and out. I've honestly, like, PAs are actually the God's greatest gift to lawyers. I tell you that for free. So if you feel like you can't ask like an associate or something like that, ask your PA, or ask a PA if you don't have a PA, because they might know, again, how to approach this person. They may be able to ask this person, all that kind of stuff. So that's how I'd say get around it. But I would definitely just remind you that, you know, in life, you're not going to ever go somewhere where everybody is going to get on and everyone's going to be perfect and this, that, whatever. That's just not how life works. So once you get around that, you don't really care too much about all these unapproachable people, because they're just people. Is it okay? Next one. So it's said that in corporate jobs, it's easy to lose interest in your work because of burnout. Do you know what? I don't think this only applies to corporate jobs. I think this applies to any job. But I was actually thinking just the other day about the fact that, you know, I feel like there's been a move from the millennials, so from the 90s kids upwards. There's been this move of, like, we don't just need to work for working's sake. We should work in our passion and we should do what we love and this, that, whatever. And I'm going to be a little bit controversial and disagree with that. I don't actually think you need to love what you do. I think you need to have an interest in what you do. And I think there's a difference. I love dancing. I love reading. I love teaching kids at church. Like, there are things that I'm passionate about that I don't monetize. And I choose not to monetize them because, you know, a lot of joy can be sucked out of monetizing something sometimes. I'm very interested in law, and I'm very interested in commercial law. So I work in it. I don't love it. I'll be honest. I'll put it out there. I don't love law, but I'm very interested in it. It intrigues me. I would happily read up about the law, like, for fun. When my mates are reading up about, you know, Kim Kardashian, I'm reading up about the new incoming CSRD regulation in the EU. Do you get what I mean? Like, so I'm definitely interested in it, but I don't love it. And I think when you have that distinction, burnout can definitely still happen. I'm not saying it can't, but I think you reduce the likelihood of it. Because for me, I think burnout comes when you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself to do something that you actually don't love. But you're trying to put in the level of work that you would put in for something that you love, if that makes sense. And because that's not sustainable, you then burn out. Like, you just can't keep up with it anymore. I feel like if you've got something you're interested in, then when you've got those days which are going to be hard, because there will definitely be hard days. There's not always going to be a good day, like, regardless of whatever it is you're doing. There will always be hard days. When those days come, you know how to practically manage that. You know how to be like, actually, but my interest overrides the fact that this, at this particular moment in time, is quite bad, so I'm still going to be fine, blah, 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 blah. Do you get what I mean? Whereas if you're just relying solely on the fact that you must love something, Charlie, one day the love will fade, and when the love fades, what will you do? So yeah, that's my answer to that. I don't know. I wouldn't say it's easy to lose interest. I would say that you can realize that other things might matter more than working. I think that definitely does happen. But then it's up to you to figure out if you can figure out a solution. Like, are you gonna work in a different area of law? Are you gonna move to a smaller firm? Like, you figure it out. But that's just my 2 cents on that. Look at you getting a little 2 cents in a YouTube video. Lucky. Anyway, next question we've got. I think this one's quite funny. Trainee solicitor equals errand guy. I think it depends on how you're defining errand guy, to be fair. And I say that because I was sent on an errand to go to Poland. But, you know, I'm not mad at that. I'm actually quite happy about that. I don't mind being sent on an errand to go to Poland. I'll tell you that for free. So I've personally never been an errand person in the sense that people are like, oh, print this, what do you call it, spiral bind or whatever. Like, I've never had to do stuff like that. And I've definitely had instances where like I'm working with an associate and they're literally like, oh, can you ask the admin team, because we do have an admin team, so they're like, oh, can you ask the admin team or document services or whatever to do XYZ. So like it might be that I'm the one liaising with the people who are doing the quote unquote errands, but I've never been like asked to just do those kind of things, if that makes sense. One thing I would say though is that I think it depends on the team and also just the person you're working with, because there are some people who are very, I don't know if the word is traditional, but like they have a very old school view of how the law firm works and hierarchies in the law firm and all that kind of stuff, in the sense that they do still genuinely believe that that's what trainees are there. Like they think that's what the role of a trainee is, if that makes sense. And if you're working with someone like that, then yeah, of course they're going to ask you to print a hard copy of something and bring it to their desk and all that kind of stuff. Like that's just what they're going to do. To answer your question, I have not had the experience of being an errand boy, quote unquote, aside from when I was asked to go to Poland, and I happily went because that was a free ticket, a 5-star hotel, lovely. Why would I say no to that? So second to last question, no social life. Do you know what, yeah? I think I'm one of the worst people to ask about this, because I, as a personal person, do not have much of a social life. That's not because of work. It's because I like to stay at home. So I do definitely think that if you are someone who wants to be sociable, you can make it work. One thing I would say though is it also depends on where your mates are working, you know, because your friends are probably also working. So don't think it's only you in a law firm who like, oh, you're busy so you can't work. Your friends in consulting, finance, wherever your friends are, they're also working, they're also busy. So what you will tend to find happens is that as adults, it's actually quite difficult to marry up timetables so that everyone can go out at the same time, which means that, you know, you're gonna have a friend who's like, oh, I'm free at 5 p.m. You might not be free at 5 p.m, but maybe you're free at 7. So it's not that you can't have a social life, but it's just that all of these things get harder to align, if that makes sense. On a personal level, I do still do many a thing. So I know I said at the beginning I don't really have much of a social life, but I do, like, I take myself to cinema, I go on holidays, I see my mates, like I still do stuff, you know what I mean? I go to the theatre, I go to the ballet, I do quite a lot. So you can definitely have a social life to the extent that you want to. But I think I've probably had more difficulty with trying to marry up my friends' schedules as opposed to me just not being able to stop working and actually go out with my friends when I want to do that. Final question that I'm going to address is that partners are rude and scary. Do you know what? I'm laughing. It's not actually funny. I'm so sorry. I think I have two answers to this, because I think my answer is actually tainted by who I've had as a supervisor across my training contract so far. So in my first seat, I had fairly senior associate. She was like 8-9 years qualified. And the team that we worked in, like we worked in the emerging markets subsection of the debt finance team. That team was quite partner heavy. So I just had to have a lot of contact with partners. Like, it, you know, it was fine. And they were lovely. Like I had no problem with them. Absolutely fine. Second seat, so I had 2 supervisors in my second seat. My first supervisor was counsel. Again, she did a lot of work with partners, so I spoke a lot to partners. Like I never viewed them as scary because I just had automatic access to them. I was already talking to them. And my second supervisor was actually made up as partner whilst I was her trainee. So again, you know, why would I think she was scary? Like she was lovely. So I guess because of how I have personally initially interacted with partners, I don't view them as scary and unapproachable and all that kind of stuff. And also I think the other thing to just remember is that these people are actually just human beings, you know. Like they're actually not, you know, I don't want to say they're not special, but they're not special. Do you know what I mean? Like they're just somebody who has worked in the industry a lot longer than you have, so they have a different title. But they're actually the same human being. So I think if you go in thinking that, it honestly just makes your working experience a lot better for you, because you can actually interact with people in the way that you need to interact with them, and you can actually do better work, etc, etc. So yeah, I would basically just say don't be scared of partners, because there's nothing to be scared of. They're all right. They're just people. That brings me to the end of my Q&A about trainee life generally. I think I'm just going to put on a little bit of